Maul says Julian was fired due to a business decision.
Yeah, I mean that was just a business decision. It's no bad blood. I just think that certain things ran its course, but it's all love from me. It's all love from Rory. We wish him the best, but it's just sometimes things run its course, and I think that it was just time to move in a different direction. That's all. There wasn't nothing negative. I've seen a lot of things online, people thinking it was like bad blood. But let me speak from myself and Rory. It's definitely no bad blood from us. It was just more so a business decision that we came to. And it was a good run. We respect him. We appreciate everything he did. But sometimes things just come to an end. But it's nothing negative. I don't want people to think that it's a negative thing. Like sometimes things just come to an end and people have to go their separate ways. But it's definitely all love from us though.
That's right, on Twitter Spaces, Maul finally revealed what happened to Julian. But I would say it was a bit short, concise, and didn't really elaborate on what I think is happening behind the scenes. Now, this all went down on Twitter Spaces on the Club Paradise community, which is a community that celebrates Drake. I will leave their link in the description. Also, it was posted by the engineer on YouTube. I will leave that link in the description as well. So, what Moss says is that Julian was fired due to a business decision, which is quite honestly fascinating to me because I know Maul was trying to keep it short and not really elaborate, but if you look at Julian's cryptic post on IG,
I just have to see how things play out before I step out and say anything. I can talk. I'm just being patient, and it's tough to be patient, but it's the smart thing and right thing to do. This is not a Wheezy Mandy rollout whatsoever. Taking control of everything and betting on me, that's just me. Putting me first above everybody for once.
an IG post saying he was mad, you can kind of tell that Julian did not like how this went. It seems like he feels underappreciated and feels like he dedicated a lot to the podcast and it wasn't exactly reciprocated. Also, Rory and Maul had an awkward goodbye to Julian and it was very, very short, just like Maul in the Twitter space.
Before we get out of here, obviously I've seen some comments on Twitter, on IG. Clearly, Julian is no longer with the podcast. We wish him the absolute best. Love to him. But yes, he's no longer part of the pod. Appreciate all the contributions and salute to him. And I think that's it. We'll be back.
And I can't help but imagine that Julian also didn't like that. But it does leave the door open for how are you supposed to say somebody left the podcast, right? Because there's a lot of ways to do this, right? There's the Joe Budden way, which is just fire people. On episode 437, that's what he did to Rory and Maul. Then there's the Deezus and Mero way, which is just don't even address it, take passive aggressive shots at each other. And I think what we're seeing here is Rory and Maul are trying to play it low key. They're not trying to go crazy with the gossipy stuff. But on the other hand, Julian is probably sitting back like, man, I want to say what happened. I don't want it to just go this way. I dedicated the last few years of my life to this podcast. I opened up about my addictions. I even got swung on by Eden, and then the way they treated me was unfair. I'm just talking from Julian's perspective. So it does leave the door open for what to do when a podcast member leaves. I do think maybe a good model would be just to have that member on the pod and they can talk about sort of what happened and how things will be moving forward, maybe plug what that person may be doing next. But I think the theory that works best as to what happened with Julian is that he likely asked for a raise or some type of extra compensation, maybe participation in the profits from ads, and they felt that he wasn't worth that, or they may have lost a lot of revenue due to the bad state of podcasting in terms of profit, right? Because when Rory and Maul first started their pod after the exit from the Joe Budden podcast, it was the golden times of the podcast era. Everybody was giving out deals, and I know podcast folks are still giving out deals like Sirius, but deals like what See the Thing Is got with Gumball, or these other minor deals, like let's say the Black Effect got, those things are done. It's largely white podcasters with huge audiences that are getting the deal done. Like even Shannon, he's not, I thought he would have his own network by now, and he doesn't seem to have his own network. He's on Colin Cowherd's network. So it just goes to show you the state of podcasting isn't exactly in the best, way. Now it's still profitable. I'm sure Rory and Maul still make a ton of money, but they can't afford to just pay everybody, and they definitely can't afford to pay everybody who asks for a raise. But besides that, Damaris still seems cool with Julian posting on her Instagram that Drew Maris is forever. But we all know how that goes. Usually when somebody leaves the workplace, the work friendships almost always die because there is no longer a common ground. And I'm curious to see if Julian is still cool with Rory. I think it's hard to maintain a friendship after you do business. It's just always going to change. Things will never be the same. I mean, you could go the Joe Budden route, like a situation with Joe and, when he let Corey go and then brought Corey back. Maybe Julian and Rory will remain friends. Now, one more thing I want to talk about is there's a lot of people mad that Julian was let go. There's a lot of people like, oh, I only listened for Julian. But are we being a bit hyperbolic? Are we saying that we came to the Rory and Maul podcast for Julian? I don't think we did. I mean, much like the Joe Budden podcast was able to bounce back after Rory and Maul will be able to bounce back after Julian. That's how it goes. As much as we like to think that the co-host we grew attached to are a big part of the show, they ultimately can be removed and business will maintain as usual. I think the numbers are down for the Rory and Maul podcast, but that's obviously because of their own doing. They don't like to give it up, and ever since the Drake Kendrick beef, numbers have dipped a bit. But you know what's coming? Super Bowl week and also Grammy week. A lot of things are about to start happening, and I think the numbers are gonna bounce back. So while I love Julian, and he was actually one of my favorite interviews I've ever done. Like, I've sat down with Rory, I've sat down with Imani, I sat down with Adam, even though he was interviewing me. I just think Julian is a funny dude. He's bright, he's smart, he knows a lot about things that aren't just hip hop focused, and he's good at elaborating on things. And you saw it on that pod. He was able to unlock moments. I think a lot of times people talk about like hip hop culture and how important it is, and it is very important, but sometimes the morals of hip hop culture can be a barrier to content creation, right? That's the thing that Maul suffers from. I'm cut from a certain cloth. I don't do these certain things. And while hip hop is very important, some of the cultural beliefs of how you approach things have to be thrown out the window. And I think that's actually what makes the Joe Budden podcast dope, right? Because he is from hip hop, but he's not afraid to entertain the audience by looking goofy and stupid. And that is what Julian brought to the pod, and that is what it is going to miss moving forward. So time will tell. I still think the Rory and Maul podcast will bounce back without Julian, but the ceiling is a little bit lower. Damaris is cool, but I don't think she was as dynamic as Julian. And Maul, I don't know, man. Maul, that's a tough cookie, man. I couldn't imagine podcasting with him. I'm telling you, man, it would be tough. It would be tough. Another route Rory and Maul can go is that Rap Radar route, where they just interview people like once a week, and they don't really have to worry about the dynamic with their co-hosts because they're not a chemistry-based pod. And with Elliot and B Dot not around, there's a void that they can fill. But let me know what you think about Maul's comments in regards to Julian. It was a fascinating reveal, but I think Maul, he probably doesn't even know what happened himself. Rory probably knows the truth, and Maul is just parroting what he thinks happened. All right, y'all. Follow me on Instagram, The Stop TV. Follow me on Twitter, The Stop TV. This is Danny from The Stop. Peace.